What is the deal with DSOs, to use a phrase from one of my favorite comedians, Seinfeld? So glad to be talking with Brian Colao of Dykema. I've seen him at conferences. We've crossed paths before, have a lot of the same friends, and so glad to have him on a Talking Nachos episode to talk about DSO trends, his conference coming up, which Dennis Job Connect is going to be a sponsor at the Dykema conference. My team is going to share that in the chat. But Brian, we have so many faces on Dental Nachos, which I love to do, share awareness of what's out there. You've never been a dentist and had to run around an an office doing a bunch of procedures, but it's possible to forget who you're going to see next as a dentist. So I say to my team, who am I going in to see next? I need to orient myself. So if you could just orient our audience for a minute or two as to what you're doing in your daily life to help dentists live their best lives.
Paul, thanks for having me here. Really nice to spend some time with you this morning. For those that don't know, I'm a director of Dykema's DSO industry group. I've been in the dental space 28 years, and I lead a group. We're a law firm. We do legal services, and I lead a group of, I think, 58 attorneys, and we represent over 650 dental organizations in all 50 states and 6 Canadian provinces. And it's sort of, all things legal and all things strategic consulting for DSO buyer, DSO sellers, group practices, throughout the United States and Canada. And that's sort of what we do.
I really like that. And you mentioned you've been in this space for 28 years, so you've seen trends. I'll kind of talk as a dentist. I've been a dentist for 20 years. And, just to use an example, my audience, dentists would take impressions with goopy material, right? All we had was the goopy material. Now we have scanners where you do not need the goopy material.
I'm old enough. I had that goopy material. It's no fun. They stick that in your mouth. It's clammy. It's cold. I like the scans better, Paul. I do.
Yes. So we have new things come into our world all the time. It is one of the cool parts of being a dentist. I will say a lot. Dentistry is quite awesome. What we can do with replacing teeth and making people smile is fantastic. The life of a dentist, as someone who's been one, has been, I don't want to say under attack, but there's been factors, whether it's decreased insurance reimbursement, challenges in the labor force, that have made me want to cry inside, Brian, a lot of times. But in your world, what have you seen? Let's just in a basic way to kind of get our audience started. The DSO trends over your career. I know they were popular at a certain time, become more popular now. What are you seeing now as just kind of a state of the DSO union for our audience?
Well, there's a great evolution and consolidation that started at least slowly about 15, 20 years ago. It accelerated at an unprecedented pace about 6 or 7 years ago. And even COVID didn't slow it down. COVID stopped everything for a couple months. And then by the time 2020 was over with, we had record M&A activity. The market consolidation rate right now is about 35-36% of the marketplace is affiliated with DSOs. There's a lot of runway to go. And in the next 10 years, I think it's going to be, 75-80% DSOs. So I wouldn't really call it like a trend, meaning like, oh, it's popular now, it's not then. It's pretty much all consolidation, Paul, all the time. And in the next 10 years, if you're still doing your show, it's going to be 80% DSOs in the marketplace.
And, as someone who's dealing with this all the time, what is the motivating factor that you see for your dentist clients to sell, collaborate, combine, consolidate, become partners? Probably all of these words fit, right? We can dig into what DSO sales look like, but let's just talk about the dentist feelings that you talk to. What is their motivating factors?
Money. There's money. There's a once in a generation return going on here right now. Dentistry has proven itself to be recession proof, pandemic proof. It's true. The labor shortage sucks. And there are some things from time to time that happens that create challenges for dental practices, but it's been one of the strongest performing segments of the economy over the last 50 years. Even it survived all kinds of things, the dot-com crash, the great recession, depression of 2006, 2007. It certainly survived COVID. Any really bad economic thing that's gone on, dentistry has even thrived, not just survived, but thrived. And that has attracted the attention of all the investors out there, the non-dentist investors, the private equity groups, the people that have billions of dollars, if not more, to deploy. And the only way, as you know, Paul, because only licensed dentists can practice dentistry, private equity people can't practice dentistry. The
Yeah.
only way investors can participate in the dental industry as an investor is through the DSO model. And a DSO provides non-clinical support services to dental practices that are 100% owned by licensed dentists. It's sort of a management company that provides non-clinical services, and private equity groups and other investors can participate in management companies, but not dental practices directly because they can't own them. So you got this party going on, a recession-proof, pandemic-proof party. All the investors want to get in, but because the investors are not dentists, the only way they can get in is through DSOs, and that's what's driving the great evolution and consolidation of the industry that's really accelerated in the last 6 or 7 years.
Awesome. I appreciate you giving us some context there for that. And also I share with my audience, it's a lot of life is asking the right questions, not having all the answers, right? Asking the right questions. Let's say someone just popped this on now live or later and said, what are some good questions? I'll just say, I'm a solo practice owner. My name's Dr. Guac. I practice in Philadelphia. I bring in $1.5 million a year. I have a 6-operatory practice. And people have told me about this DSO thing. And maybe I want to sell to a private practice buyer. Maybe I want to sell to a DSO. What are some good questions Dr. Guac should ask or think about when
a couple things
connecting with DSOs?
Well, 3 or 4 things come to mind. Who's going to be the right partner for you? It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And nobody has to do something. Like I've spoken before, Paul, and they're like, you're trying to scare us. You're trying to pressure us. My mission is education. I'm now a dental school professor. I'm teaching at a couple dental schools, the business of dentistry. So my mission is education. It's not like you don't have to do anything. But I'm telling you, in the next 10 years, 80% of the industry is going to be DSOs. So to me, it's not a question of if, but a question of when. So if you're considering, you got 1.5 million of revenue and you're trying to figure it out, one, you got to figure out what your EBITDA is, because all of the buyers pay a multiple of EBITDA. Okay.
Tell us, I'm in Philadelphia. My favorite movie is that Philadelphia movie from back in the day. Denzel Washington would consistently say in that wonderful movie, explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. So explain it
Bruce
EBITDA.
Springsteen soundtrack and all
explain EBITDA to us like we're 4-year-olds. If someone
says, I'll do it right now. I don't know if it'll be 4-year-old, but I'll try to do it best I can. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. It's the gold standard for valuing practices. Why is it the gold standard? Okay, you got a $2 million practice, right? It costs $1.8 million to operate. Your EBITDA is $200,000. Okay, you've got a $1 million practice. It costs $600,000 to operate. Your EBITDA is $400,000. What have we learned? The $1 million practice is twice as valuable as the $2 million practice. That's why we use EBITDA as the gold standard, because it cuts through all the BS and tells us not what your gross revenue is, but how profitable and valuable your practice is. And what happens often, like all the time practically, is a higher revenue practice is often, not always, but often worth less than a lower revenue practice that's run more efficiently. So that is why EBITDA is the gold standard for valuing practices. So if you're listening to this and you don't know what your EBITDA is, you need to get with your accountant and you need to calculate it. If your accountant can't do it for you, and some can't, we got to fire that accountant and get an accountant that's familiar with the DSO industry and can get your EBITDA calculated. So question number 1 for our Philadelphia person, what is my EBITDA? Question number 2, because that'll help us guide what the value of your practice is. Otherwise, you're fumbling around in the dark. Wouldn't you want to know what the value of your organization might potentially be? You might say, it's not valuable enough. I'm going to grow it more before I sell. Totally fair. You might say it's valuable enough. Shoot, I need to do a transaction this month. How do I do that? Or you might say, it's kind of in the middle and it can go either way. And, we're going to sit back and see what kind of offers come in. All fair, but you got to know what your EBITDA is. That's first of all. You got to know what type of partner you want. Some partners are hands-off. Some are up in your business. You need to know, do you want a hands-on or hands-off partner? That's another really, really important question to ask. Number 3, what can you do right now, or is there anything you can do right now in the short term to increase your EBITDA? I had a guy that was paying a hygienist $325,000. I couldn't understand it. But as soon as we right-sized the compensation and got it down to where it needed to be, his EBITDA skyrocketed. And the value of his organization went up dramatically. So what can we do right now even in the short term, 6 months, a year, 3 months, 2 years to improve our EBITDA. These are sort of the things that I would start thinking about if you're contemplating a sale. Now, as for the private practice thing, they don't pay the same. I mean, this is pretty common sense, Paul, right? Imagine if you're like, use your Philadelphia example. Imagine if your only universe of potential buyers for your practice is Pennsylvania licensed dentists, or if your universe is the world, anybody that can invest. Which do you think, one of those condescending multiple choice questions, which do you think is going to yield the higher return? Obviously, the world is going to yield a higher return because there's a ton more competition than if your only universe was Pennsylvania licensed dentists.
And I want to catch people up. I'm talking with Brian Clay of Dykema, and my goal is to share awareness. I talk about dental insurance. Our office right now, Brian, is totally out of network. I was in network for 15 years. Some spoiled guac PPOs started paying us less. I love to bring awareness to my dental nachos world about what's out there without judgment, because it's out there. So we're talking about DSOs, private practices, selling your practice with Brian Colao, getting some context on this industry from someone who lives inside of it all day. I'm a broker too, Brian, and I help dentists sell practices. Talk to me about this, and maybe there's been some adjustment in this. If someone sells to a DSO, most of the time, how many years is the DSO requiring them to continue to work in that practice?
This depends, okay? There are different buyers. There are what's called strategic buyers. They're very large DSOs. I'm not going to mention them on the show, but who they are. Very, very big, well-known DSOs. And then there's private equity investors that are like forming a brand new platform. Maybe they're going to buy, a group of like group practice of 6 or 7 offices to start the platform. And then they're going to grow it to 25, 30, or 40 and sell it. That's like sort of a private equity play in the middle market. Or you might have a big DSO that has 1,000 offices and they're going to add yours, and now you're 1,001. If you're getting added as 1,001 to a well-run big DSO organization, it can vary depending on how old you are. If you're in your 60s or 70s, they may say, hey, you're going to sign a 6-month or a 1-year consulting agreement and you can leave anytime.
Because they have backfill positions. They feel
they have backfill. They know how to run
they have
practice.
A bench. They like iSports. They have a bench.
They know how to run your practice. You're now practice 1001. They know how to run your practice. They know what they're going to do. They want you to hang around for 6 months to a year for a smooth transition, maybe until they get your replacement. Hang for a year, the longer of a year or two, or if we find your replacement in 3 or 4 months, you can leave in 3 or 4 months. If you want to stay longer, the strategics, the DSOs will let you stay almost as long as you want to. But if you want to leave, it can be arranged that you can leave. If you're a private equity deal and you are the platform that they're buying, you got to stay minimum of 5 years. The whole thing depends on what you do in the next 5 years. So if you're 72, 73 years old, probably don't want to do a PE deal. But if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you got 5 more years, even early 60s, and you easily got 5 more years to do this, sure, private equity deal would be good. But how it does will depend on you and your efforts. And you're going to, probably sign customarily a 5-year employment agreement, and they're going to want to sell it a second time, and you're going to participate in a second equity event. Versus if you're doing a deal, I sometimes, Paul, talk about stocks and bonds. Stocks and bonds are safer, really, really safe, but a lower return. Stocks are riskier, but a higher return. If you do a deal with a very large DSO that has 700 offices, 1,000 offices, they know how to run your practice. It's a low risk thing for you. You're going to get usually a lower return, but a lot less is going to be asked of you, and you can exit quicker and all that other stuff, but you're going to get a lower return. You do a private equity play, you're likely going to have a lot more upside and can get a lot greater return, but you're going to have to sign a 5-year contract and you're going to have to run this thing.
And I want to share, my parents sometimes growing up, Brian, said, you should be a lawyer, but they didn't always say it in the nicest way to me. And I said, because I could argue, and you're the lawyer, I'm the dentist. I'll share with you, us dentists go to dental school and they kind of run you through the dental student Hunger Games, and dentists have we talk about EBITDA, it's facts, and this is a feeling. How well do you play with others, right? So like dentists, whether you're 37 or 67, sometimes we have a play well with others problem because we never were taught how to play well with others. With your clients, I'm just curious if you could add some value on the feelings expectation for someone who's been running their own show for 17 years. Maybe they're super profitable and they're doing everything themselves, and a PE group says, we're going to get you X amount of return on this, but now they got to join forces with them any comments on the mindset of joining forces and playing well with others?
Remember my comments about picking the right partner a few minutes ago. Now, there's a small percentage of people, and I have some, we can't talk about them on the show, that just can't work for anybody. They just can't. I mean, it's just not going to happen. If you're one of those mystical creatures that just can't work for anybody, period, then you're just going to have to run your own practice for as long as you can. And then maybe when you're old enough, you can sell it to a DSO and exit in a year or something and, just do that. But most people can, even people that have become accustomed to doing their own thing, when they sit down with DSOs and they realize that, one, their overhead's going to go way down because a lot of non-clinical efficiencies are going to get realized. Your costs of supplies and equipment is going to be 30, 40 cents on the dollar what you're paying. You're going to have streamlined HR, streamlined accounting, streamlined financial reporting. Your revenue cycle management is going to be professionally done. You're going to capture 100% of the insurance dollars at a lot less cost than you were doing. They kind of look at it and they're like, wow, I wasn't sure if this was a good idea, but holy crap, I don't have to do this. Because first question I ask to my dental students when I'm teaching my course is, how many courses have you taken here, folks, on HR, how to hire, fire, and train it? It's like 0. How many courses have you taken on how to negotiate with, I don't know, Patterson and Henry Schein over what you're going to pay for your goods? It's like 0. How many courses have you taken on negotiating reimbursement rates for insurance companies? It's like 0.
It is crazy that, I kind of explain it in the basketball way. I want to be a professional basketball player. It's like they leave out like how to dribble the ball, right? And it's like you get out in the game, you're like, dribbling's really key. And it's crazy. I was at an alumni event from my dental school last night with these, awesome students. And it's a tale as old as time. It doesn't matter if I was 2002, 1982, or 2022. I'm glad to hear that some schools are trying.
It's not today. If you have one of my courses, Paul, you'll actually know something about it.
Which schools have you coming into?
UCLA, I'm getting ready to do one, and there's one that I just signed a contract for. I'm going to announce it in the near future. But UCLA right now, and a second one's coming online here. And actually, I'm in discussions with 3 or 4 more where, because COVID taught us this virtual thing, I don't have to appear in person. We can even do virtual. So in the near future, I'm probably going to be doing it to 5, 6, 7, 8 8 schools here in the near future, if we count the virtual world, which I think I can effectively teach the business of dentistry virtually. So we're going to be doing that. But anyway, the point behind all this stuff is what you'll learn. These folks that were hesitant in the beginning, when they suddenly realize you're relieved of all this non-clinical stuff. You don't got to negotiate supplies and equipment. You don't got to negotiate with landlords. You don't have to be the HR director and hire and fire and deal with employees anymore. You don't have to fight the hand-to-hand combat of billing and collecting and reimbursement rates. You don't got to do any of that anymore. You just show up and treat your patients. And if you're the owner and you've got several locations, you can be the clinical director and train other associates to treat patients.
Tell me about, I want to get to that point in a minute. So that there is a real loneliness factor to being a dentist, right? So when you do join forces, you might be able to meet some people who you become friends with, right? And I've seen this happen in my world. But let's say a dentist is thinking, okay, I really would like to give up these admin things. That sounds great. But I'm concerned a DSO is going to tell me to do more crowns or treatment plan this. In your experience, how does that factor influence the dentist experience? Are they getting impacted clinically, or do good DSOs kind of say, you're the dentist, we're the business people, let's keep them separate? Tell us about that.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of DSOs that are private equity backed or have investors are very reputable. They're not going to tell you how to treat your patients. It's a line in the sand. They just don't do that. Now, I've been in space 28 years. The reason people think these things is because we went back 20 years, 25 years. There were some bad actors in the industry that sort of did some of that stuff and had quotas and had some things. So a lot of the older dentists, like the younger ones, are open-minded, but the ones in their 50s and 60s sort of remember some of those horror stories from 25 years ago. And they're like, if I sign up with a DSO, they're going to tell me how to treat patients. I'm going to lose my clinical autonomy. That's really not not the case. I mean, you might always see one,
Yeah.
1 in 100 crazy outlier, but 99%
And
of
I
the
would
DSOs.
share, getting back to some of your advice in the beginning, this is what I
Yeah.
share when I connect people, is it's finding the right partner and asking them good
That's right.
questions, and hopefully talking to people that they've done this with before, right? So sometimes I'll introduce a potential seller to a DSO and private practices, and they say, let me talk to someone who sold them. Say, okay, talk to them and see how their experience is. And then, dentists are not particularly good at lying to each other about that stuff. So it's very authentic. They talk to someone they ain't gonna lie, whether so I think that's a key point. I want to ask this.
I mean, the message to your viewers real quick before we move on,
Yeah, sure.
99.9% of the DSOs stay out of the clinical stuff. They're not going to tell you, like you said, do more crowns or do that. They're not going to tell you anything. It's going to be up to you to treat your patients. There were 25 years ago, a couple bad actors that unfortunately gave a bad name. So some of the older dentists remember that and maybe are hesitant, but do your diligence. Talk to the dentists that are in the platform right now. It's a great idea, Paul. And what you're going to see is, from a clinical standpoint, they really don't get involved, the DSOs. They let the clinicians.
I also think this, I see where it's like, why would they really want to get involved, right? Like, why would someone say, I mean, I know the why could be potentially more profits, but you're not going to make your person who you count on every day to run your business feel good if you kind of come in. It's like telling a chef how to chop their vegetables different. It usually doesn't create a good relationship.
They don't want to do that, because the most effective organizations are collaborations, partnerships, where the dentists handle the clinical side and the DSO handles the non-clinical side. And, neither party really wants to be, involved. Sometimes there might be like a gray area, so they'll come together, collaborate, come to a consensus. But for the most part, the DSO does not want to treat patients, and the dentists don't want to do all that non-clinical stuff. It can really be a very good match for the right person.
Perfect. My next are you a fan of NFL football at all?
I love NFL.
Who's your favorite team?
I'm a big Giant fan. I'm a big New York Giant fan, and this year we made a little comeback. It was kind of rough for a while, but this year was pretty good.
I was an OG Giants fan, but I live in Philadelphia. I raised my daughter, so we're Eagles fans now. Jordan Mailata lives in my building.
I can't participate anymore.
It was a great year for the NFC East in general, but we saw in the Eagles 49ers championship game that when your quarterback goes down, there's a big problem. And I have Dentist Job Connect. Tell us a little bit about whether it's an insurance policy for the dentist, whether it's collaboration. How does growing an associate inside of your practice help you be more attractive DSO, less attractive? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you have to have an associate to affiliate with a DSO. You kind of don't, because, what's your worst nightmare, right? If you're a solo practitioner and you don't have an associate, you get ill or something. If you affiliate with a DSO, they have a deep bench. They'll be able to solve your problem. I mean, maybe not like overnight, but if, you affiliated and you're the only dentist and suddenly you become disabled or ill, the DSOs are very good at this. With a little bit of lag time, they're going to solve that. You're going to be okay. You're at a far bigger risk if you're not affiliated with a DSO and it's just you and you have no help. This is the loneliness and the island that you were talking about earlier, Paul. Yeah. And one thing I do want to say on this point is, a lot of dentists, solo dentists that I talk to, are very surprised to hear, they run around and they say things to me like, well, I don't want to do that DSO thing because I have a high standard of clinical care over here and I don't want to compromise it. They're very surprised to learn that DSOs statistically have a higher quality of care than solos. And I'll tell you why. This is not to say that there aren't solos that are awesome. Of course they are. But across the whole industry, DSOs have a higher quality of care. And I'll tell you why. There's accountability, right? If you're a solo and you're only accountable to yourself and you're not doing a good job, or you're confused by something, or you don't know, maybe you could go to study group and ask a couple questions. But other than that, you're kind of stuck. At a DSO, you got dozens on the low end, dozens on the high end, hundreds of dentists you can collaborate with. People are watching you. Other dentists are watching your performance, clinical directors. And if they see, everybody else did 5 crowns this month on average. Like, our organization is 5.6 crowns a month. You did like 37. Like, hey, what's going on here? Like, so why are you doing that?
I did a residency program in a hospital, Brian, and I really did the medical model of doctors looking over each other's shoulders in a good way, not a punitive way, is awesome, because they say, hey, that's not how we should do it. Let's try it this way. And dentists are on their own island out there. And I think that is an important point. I was asked to speak to a DSO recently to all their 100 associates about case acceptance. And I think it's important for all dentists to constantly be raising their game. And I think, tell me a little bit about this, the associate world, going to a private practice, going to a DSO at a school. How do DSO recruit associates? What are some of the reasons why DSOs are winning the new dentist battle? Is it benefits? Is it schedule? Tell us some of that.
I mean, a couple things. One, I mean, the old model is antiquated, where you come out of dental school. I think you owe $300,000, $400,000 maybe in loans if you're not independently wealthy. You owe like a whole bunch of money when you come out of dental school, and now you're going to go to Bank of America or one of the big banks and say, "Can I get like $1 million loan on top of the $500,000 I owe to my dental school?" And now I'm like leveraged where I can't even afford to buy a house now because I've got all this debt and everything. You could do that. Or you could go work for a DSO. And some of them have programs where they'll pay off your debt for you after a certain year of service. Two, you don't have to worry about taking out a loan to open up your practice. You sort of become, employee of the practice that's affiliated with the DSO organization. And then they have bonuses and stock, and you can participate often over time. When the DSOs get sold, you can get a share of the profits. And it really becomes a tremendous situation without you ever having to invest in opening up a dental practice. And quite frankly, that's very attractive and very appealing to a lot of the graduates that are getting out of dental school right now.
So basically, and I see this through Job Connect daily. We have DSO jobs, we have private practice jobs. As still currently a private practice group owner, I still see a lot of value to both worlds. One of the things with the DSO worlds is you're often replacing a dentist or adding to growth where you have a busyness factor that's higher than private practice. So that often gets you more reps. In private practice, sometimes you have mentors on site. Tell me a little bit about what are good DSOs doing to grow their organization in a way that benefits dentistry. Are they going out to local dental C courses and collaborating with dentists and try to say they're not scary? Are they trying to tell me just a little bit about where you see those? Because you also shared before we got on that there's been a slowdown a little bit. So you can talk about that and whether that's an economic slowdown or something like that. So share and in-store growth. So tell us some of those things.
Well, yeah, I mean, the DSOs are trying to be ambassadors of their organizations to dental schools. They're putting on job fairs. They're doing a lot of education. They're putting together really attractive compensation packages for associates, sign-on bonuses, programs that vary where they'll pay off some of your student debt over time based on years of service in the organization. World-class CE and training where you can come on and do mentorship programs. There's a lot of DSOs that'll say, you might be a GP, you're coming and you're doing GP, but maybe you always wanted to do implants. You were fascinated by implants. You don't feel like you can do it, but you're fascinated, or wisdom teeth extraction. You don't know that you're good at it, but you really want to do those cases. They'll get you a mentorship or a fellowship program or something with some of the best clinicians in the country. And after a couple of years of service, I see this all the time where associates say, hey, I was doing regular GP work, but I wanted to do implants, and my DSO arranged for courses and training and other things. And now here I am like in year 4, and now I'm doing implants. Now I'm competently doing implants, or I didn't think I could do complicated wisdom teeth extraction. I thought I had to refer that to an oral surgeon, but now I'm in year 4 after a couple of years of training. I'm pulling wisdom teeth all the time in my practice.
I mean, this might be a win-win for both sides of this, Ryan. I get messages from saying, hey, I've been working at XYZ DSO for 4 years. I have a lot of good clinical experience, but I'm looking to buy my first practice. I'm going to go, they're going to switch over to private practice and buy one. Do some DSOs have a path to partnership and some don't?
Yep.
Tell us about
that. They do.
That.
That's another point, right? A lot of them out there, not all of them, but a lot of them out there will say, yeah, if you showed up at the DSO as just an employee of the dental office that was affiliated, and you were just, an employee, you were working on a % of collections plus a bonus of some sort. But then they said, we're expanding in your city, and we're going to open up, like you might be in Dallas where I am. We're expanding, and we're going to open up another practice in Dallas. We'll do a joint venture with you where we can split the profit profits of that practice, 51-49, 60-40, some deal like that, where now you can basically share in the profits of additional offices under some JV joint venture models. So yeah, I mean, this is where I said earlier, you got to pick the partner, because there's a whole smorgasbord of things out there that are really entrepreneurial and really cool. But if you're an associate, I mean, and some associates, I had one in Miami a couple of weeks ago. It was funny. God bless him. I mean, I enjoyed meeting him. He was like, I don't want my own practice. He goes, I just want to date girls out here. I want to get a nice salary, and I want to be on a date or on the beach every Friday at 5 o'clock. And, the DSO model, the one he was affiliated with, worked perfectly. He got a % of collections plus a bonus and had no other responsibilities.
And that's why I think what you're sharing is it's the right plan for the right dentist. There's right private practice plans. There's right group practices plans.
That's what I'm saying. The dentist
DSO
from
plans.
last week, Paul, was on the beach every day at 5 o'clock, dating girls or doing what he wanted to do. He wanted no responsibilities other than treating patients. There was a DSO that worked for that. Other associates are like, well, no, I'm entrepreneurial. I want to share in the profits of some practices and open them up. There's DSOs that'll do joint venture models with you, that even though you join as an associate, you can become a joint venturer as they expand and open up new offices and share in the profits of that. So there are entrepreneurial opportunities. There are opportunities where you just kind of work there and go home if that's what you want to do. A lot of moms tell me, like dentists that have small children, they're like, this is the greatest thing. I couldn't, I feel like I want to raise my family. I don't have time to like run the practice, but I certainly have time to show up, treat patients, and go home. Some of them do it part-time. They're like, hey, I was a dentist. Now I've had my first child. I want to spend half the time at home, but half the time practicing dentistry so that my skills remain sharp. There's DSOs that are like, come on, we got you 20 hours a week.
I think the reason why I like doing things like this, and the reason why we have Ideal Practices as a sponsor, Dental Nachos, that does my first practice and helps people live that dream. And then we have, like you said, busy parents who maybe have spouses that have big time jobs, and owning, two people owning businesses inside of a marriage can be a recipe for total disaster.
That's right.
And we need people to help people. I want to share about this. So sometimes people think, they say, dentists never go out of business, but I have a coaching client. She went out of business, right? She went bankrupt. And then I recently was on a call for Dentist Job Connect with a group that met us from LinkedIn, and they go, we buy distressed DSOs. We buy distressed DSOs. So what happens when things don't go well? There's a group that buys a DSO. What did they do wrong in the process? I'm just curious. You might work with groups like this. Did they not understand dentistry? Did they kind of want to take their financial ball and go home? Tell us a little bit about that.
There's 6 parts to this business, and that's another thing I lecture on both in dental schools and at conferences and in the industry. If you screw up any of these 6 pillars of a successful DSO, I mean, I'm going to give you the 40-minute lecture in like 35 seconds. I'll just give you the real quick version of it. But I sometimes get up for an hour and like talk about all this stuff. But there's 6 things you have to do. You got to get along with your affiliated dentist. You have to partner with them and get along with them. You have to put patients in the seats. You have to follow the regulations. You have to be able to attract and retain talent. You have to right size your overhead and not overdo it on your overhead. And you have to have a winning culture. If you can do these 6 things, you're going to be really successful. If you fall down on some, maybe you can screw up one of them and still sort of be okay. But you start falling down on more than one of these things, it's a big, big problem for you. And when we look, because I represent now, regrettably, we're in a bit of a recession. I've got 4 distressed deals going on right now where I'm representing buyers that are buying these things for 60, 70 cents on the dollar and going in and doing this. These organizations definitely had improper overhead. They couldn't attract and retain talent, and they weren't getting along with their dentist. And those were sort of 3 of the characteristics that I'm seeing right now in the marketplace that is leading to these distressed deals.
And I think, that was really great 6 points. My team will kind of put those in comments. And I think from what I hear, and I like sports a lot, you see this in every, they don't get along with the star players. The sports don't do well, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what they do. If management and the star player does not get along, and we've seen this in basketball, you've seen this in football.
Go look at Aaron Rodgers now.
Yes, exactly. Perfect example. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to do 2 things. I want to talk about Dykema, but also you talked about, and I think this could help any dental practice, the in-store growth, the slowdown of the money, and focusing on things that are happening in your practice to grow. You talk about revenue cycle management, you talk about marketing, Tell our audience, if you're saying, hey, whether you have a 6-office DSO, a 60-office DSO, a private practice down the street, there are things that you can do in your practice to grow. What are some of those things according to you?
Yeah, in-store growth is going to be critical because the M&A is not going to be necessarily as explosive as it's been. It's still going on, but for some organizations, they can't expand through M&A as fast as they want this year. So same-store growth is going to be critical. Patient finance plans, absolutely critical for patients that need the treatment but can't afford it. Patient finance is critical. Artificial intelligence diagnostic catches more cavities and other things, and it's ethical. It's just you missed it with your naked eye. The AI caught it. It's totally legitimate. That leads to more cases, more revenue. Getting your revenue cycle management times down, really, really critical. Lowering, your cost of supplies and equipment. And there are some software solutions that will help you do that. They will analyze what you're buying and they'll make sure you get the right price. Paul, the airplanes, when I fly to Philadelphia or New York, I've been doing this 28 years. It used to be a 2-hour, 15-minute flight. Now it's 3 hours. The tectonic plates have not moved. The continents have not gotten longer. What's happened is the airlines figured out if they slow the planes down, they save fuel, and they might save a couple $100s per flight, and off thousands and thousands of flights, they save millions of dollars. Same thing with buying. You might say, oh, it's close enough. I'm paying 10 cents more for this. What do I care? Over tens of thousands of purchases, 10 cents more adds up to your bottom line and increases your
I think
EBITDA.
you can always say to people, because no matter how, even if you're Mark Costas level fit, when people count calories and track themselves, they lose weight and get in better shape. So when you pay attention and you enter MyFitnessPal, it holds you accountable. So I think that's really good. And I'll share what the DSO asked me to speak to their group about, and I lecture on is case acceptance with the patients. You have patients in your office that benefit from the work that you do. So instead of sometimes dentists become obsessed with new patients, it's good to be passionate about them. There are people inside of your own office that you could do more work on because you already have a relationship with them. It's unlocking that potential.
Yeah, and there's AI that'll listen to your phone calls, by the way, and tell you, hey, patients are not signing up because your prices are too high. They're not signing up because your folks are not asking them to make an appointment. They don't like your office hours. You're closing at 4:30. They want to come at 6 or 7. And if you listen to what the AI analysis tells you, you used to have to listen to hundreds of hours of calls. You don't got to listen to anything. Just read the report now, and you implement these solutions. You're going to get massive, patient retention, and people are going to come. So, if you can't grow through M&A right now, same store growth is key. And all of these innovative tools out there will really, really help you sort of grow your growth and increase your EBITDA. I mean, it's an exciting time. I love talking about this.
I love this. We've shared tremendous value. I'm excited. Dentist Job Connect's going to be coming to Dykema. Your team is great that I've talked to so far. Andre's just so awesome. Team leader. Tell our audience, what is the Dykema conference? When is it? And who would benefit from being there?
All right, so this is our 10th year. We're really excited about this. And if you like the Go-Go's, we got Belinda Carlisle's going to sing at this thing. We signed her. We've got some other talent we're looking at under contract. Got a big drone show. It's going to be cool. But this is for anybody, really. Solos, groups, DSOs. It is a DSO conference because remember, the whole industry, like it or not, is transitioning to DSOs. But solos and groups that are not affiliated with DSOs in particular, this is a really huge educational opportunity for you. All the questions that you were afraid to ask, and maybe you want to know, like, what is EBITDA, like what's that and why is it important, we're going to answer all this stuff. So you can come, if you're a solo and you really want to learn about this, you can come sit in the audience, no one will hassle you, and just listen to this stuff. Now if you're the opposite, you want to do a deal, well, then come, and it's the greatest networking opportunity you've ever seen. Every DSO practically that's any legitimate at all will be there. So if you're like, hey, I want to do a deal, who do I talk to? Show up at this event. We'll tell you exactly who you can talk to. And I pride myself, Paul, that if I took you to one of our receptions that we have at the conference, and we have a lot of them, and I showed you that room, I can make introductions in about 5, 10, 15 minutes that it might take 6 months to get all these people together.
That's the power. I mean, we're online, we're sharing with the world, and I love online. Online is great for awareness, I say, Brian, but in person is for action. In person is for saying, I now know this person, they know me, we had a glass of wine, we had coffee, I learned about this. And also I share with dentists, this is a bit crazy. Like, they always say death and taxes are two sure things. And also wanting to one day sell your dental practice is assurance, right? Nobody wants to very few dentists want to practice till the last day of their life. So at least start to learn about what it looks like to sell a dental practice. Some people are going to learn, you got to build your practice up. Some people, and I try to be, I didn't know this before I was a broker. They say, Paul, I don't want to sell to a DSO. I go, it's not going to be a problem. You only do $150,000 a year and you have 2 operatories, right? So I say, don't worry, you're not a DSO sale. So some of it's just understanding private practice, DSO, group practice, and just learning about what's out there in this.
And we have workshops on the first day of our conference. We have a marketing workshop. We've got a sellers workshop. If you're interested in selling or you think you might be in the future, D. Fisher is doing like an operational workshop. Great. We have an HR workshop just on the first day before we even get to the big stage on Thursday and Friday. So anybody, I mean, go to DykemaDSO.com. We're going to get you guys a discount code for your audience, special for your audience. Hopefully by the time people listen to this, maybe you put it on the screen or that'll be up and running. But we'll have a discount code for everybody. We're expecting 2,500 people. It's going to be Denver, July 19th to the 21st. It's really for anybody, because even if you're a solo or a group and you just want to learn, you want to understand what's going on, it's a great event. Just incredible.
I love that, Brian. I really appreciate what you shared. I share as someone who's built at this current time a 47,000 member Facebook group that I'm proud of. I really love face-to-face interaction.
And you're going to be there, and we haven't talked about this yet, Paul, but we've got recording studios there, and I hope you'll take us up. I mean, this is like live for the first time, maybe discussing this, but I hope you'll take us up on the opportunity to record some content from the event live to your audience. We do that all the time. I know this is like your first time being a big sponsor. We're real excited to have you, but we would love for you to do some live content at the event. It would be incredible.
I think it's just inspiring people to come hang out with other people in dentistry is what we need more of. Having uncomfortable conversations, like our friend Mark Costa says, leading to growth is what we need more of. Being less, finding out the reality of what these things look like is what we need more of. And you guys are doing that. So I'm excited to come and sponsor DykemaDSO.com. We'll get you a Nacho deal. Brian, stick around for a minute. We're going to go off Facebook Live.